I think I should be paid. You know, I'm kind of like I'm kind of like the guy that that you see in the cartoon that has the the placard.
Or like the car, like when they wrap the cars.
I was thinking about doing that.
Yeah, you could your body is wrapped. You have to.
In fact, I was thinking about putting it in the back of my pickup. Put in a big thing, and I would go to these events, but have in the back of my pickup.
Says Tricord Advisors.
Your 1952 Chevy?
1951 Chevy.
Chevy
nice
5.
And it is, and I put in the back of the pickup, your friend's best ally, your money's best ally.
Yeah.
Tricord Advisors, put that, because the pickup draws attention. No matter where I drive, it draws attention.
Are you going to put a Christmas wreath on the front of that truck?
No, I don't drive enough for that.
Oh, it'd be so cute.
I think you should.
It would be.
Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Building Wealthy Habits. It's a Tricord Advisors podcast. We meet each week where we talk about good topics. We take listener questions. We talk about things that we get from our clients. But basically, we're trying to get some wisdom and some knowledge to help you make wise decisions with your money. We rotate who's here each week. You got all three of us at the moment. You have Randy Barkley.
Trio.
Yeah, trio. So Randy Barkley is a certified financial planner. Laura Lee, Barkley, that's her maiden name. Laura Lee, who is on her way to being a certified financial planner.
She's passed all the work. She's just waiting for the time to go by.
That's right.
Right.
And she has her MBA in personal finance. And then myself, I'm Jeremiah Lee. I'm a certified financial planner, also a California licensed attorney. And we talk through questions each week.
Mm-hmm.
Many of you who listen to this on the radio would know us as Retirement Unlimited. Randy's had a radio program for years and years of speaking about retirement.
How many
stuff.
years were you thinking?
Over 12 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
it's crazy, huh?
That is amazing.
We've focused for a long time on retirement, but we do a lot more than just retirement with our clients. Mm-hmm. And on the radio, we want to make sure we bring that content and that knowledge to everyone. So we talk about retirement items. We also talk about things that are relevant to business owners. And we also talk about things that are relevant to survivors, someone who's lost a spouse or someone who's lost their parents.
Mm-hmm.
And you're kind of walking into that new dynamic. So we talk each week. If there's something that you hear on this show that's interesting and you want to connect with us, you can go to our website, tricordadvisors.com. If there's a question or a topic that you'd love for us to answer, we would love to hear from you. We're always looking for new content, new ideas. You can go to our website again, tricordadvisors.com, and you can send us a comment or something like that. But today,
let's dive in.
Yeah, today is a
What
good
do we
time.
got?
We spoke 2 weeks ago about succession planning and what it looks like when someone is ready to exit their business. It can also be applied to someone who's just a CEO or a large manager role. They're looking to transition out. And we spoke about how do you sell your business? How do you pass it to the next generation? Kind of I would say more of the technical structuring. Well, today we're talking a little more of the emotional side of that, of how do you have a succession plan that's not just to get you out, was what kind of we talked about last week.
Yeah.
But how do you make sure the business is successful? And this goes into...
How do you do it right?
Yeah, do it right.
How do you do it right?
How do we do it right?
Phrase it. And some of it is when you want to have a legacy. If you built it, it's yours. You want to make sure it continues on. And part of it is with a lot of these plans, there's some sort of a financial incentive to the owner when they exit, that they're tied to the business still, whether it's an earn-out.
Yeah, because in most cases, the business owner has ownership. I mean, or the CEO has ownership in the company, whether it be a small business or a public company, right? I mean, there's a sense of ownership for sure. And the question is how do you transition without damaging the company? In fact, the transition, what you want it to do is to enhance the company.
Yeah.
You want it to be a benefit to the company and to the customers. But so often it doesn't work out that way, does it?
No, it's hard. It's a hard moment. So Laura, I'll start with you. Like, when should people start thinking about this? When should they start getting ready for this?
I think the answer is as soon as possible. I think the most successful CEOs, business owners, upper management that start planning for their succession almost from day one, having a sense of what their exit strategy is going to look like. Now, that's ideal. In reality, very, very few start planning much before the last couple years. When they're now the time is upon them. What am I going to do next? Right, and I thought what was interesting, I read an article recently that said they can quantify an impact on the revenue for a company that hasn't had a clear succession plan mapped out or doesn't have a sense of leadership development internally, et cetera. They quantified a 3% reduction in revenue on average for a company that doesn't have a succession plan in place. So the best CEOs are those who start planning almost from day one what their exit's going to look like. How many exit?
I mean, I think that's some good wisdom. And this would apply to someone who's a business owner, someone who is just a lead manager. As you walk into a new role, to think someday I'm going to be leaving this role, hopefully moving on to a further role. But how do I going to make this successful, knowing that I might either manage it or I might be selling it, and to have that thought. It's interesting what you said of that 3%, and whether that comes from the individuals themselves in that transition point, which is probably what most people think, that they do a good transition, they get more value. I could see it also just being the staff and the team. They know what their future looks like.
Yeah, the statistic actually related to the whole company revenue. That was a 3% reduction.
And again, we're looking at, a lot of the articles that, in fact, I read some of the articles you talked about, and it talks about public companies, but the vast majority of business is small business. And small businesses don't have the privilege of having a large board of directors and having the revenue to be able to do, to hire people that would, so to speak, be hired and trained to take over the CEO position.
Right. Yeah.
Small businesses don't have that luxury. So they are going through this transition potentially, and it's going to be disastrous for everybody. Yeah. So,
a little maybe story time, Randy. We had a client a few years ago that had a electronics parts business.
Yes.
And you worked with them for years and talked about what's going to happen to the business. And, can you tell me a little bit about the story?
Well, he sold it. He sold it to the employees. He had key individuals within that company. And then we had a 2007, 2008 event occur, and the business dropped off dramatically. And the employees couldn't continue to make payments to him. So he had to take the business back. And interesting enough, the employee that he sold the company to stayed as an employee. So he stayed into that. And then he looked at the business.
That was plan one. Plan one was sell it.
Plan one was sell it to the employees.
And he was going to carry back the paper. So he was going to carry back the cost of the sale.
Transaction. Yeah.
And he was going to get monthly payments or whatever. And that didn't work. So he then, when he got the company back and he took it back over, he says, "Now, what do I want to do?" But he's in the midst of a downturn into a recession. So he said, my goal at that stage was just to do enough business so I could keep these people employed. He felt such a, not an obligation, but he just felt like it was morally correct.
Like a loyalty.
It really was. And he said, I don't need the money. I have enough money of my own. But he says, I want to make sure that they have enough money to have, they keep the food on the table, keep the roof over their head, pay for their benefits, those kinds of things. So he worked for years, just keeping the door open without really taking any significant profit from it at all.
Where is he now? Is he still working?
No, what happened is he died suddenly. He died suddenly. And what happened, I mean, to be really candid, he had a son who was really not involved with the business. And the son we had a long conversation, we had several meetings with him. And he said, do I carry on my father's, his desire? And we kind of counseled him and says, be careful here, because I said, that's his desire, not your desire. So at the end of the day, he ended up liquidating the business and selling off the business practices. And he gave economics, he gave money to the employees and such, ran it for a certain period of time. They helped him kind of close the business down. Fortunately, we were in a good market cycle, and every one of those employees then could go out and get a job. He didn't feel like he was leaving them on the curb, so to speak.
So this is an interesting example, because it's not just plan A. Sometimes there's going to be some curveballs. And so maybe what is actually valuable is not just making one plan, but a second plan, a plan B. And in that case, it was a forced exit strategy, unfortunately by death, that it's like, okay, now what do we do? So,
and that's something that affects small businesses a lot.
Yeah.
And people are just, they don't think about it, but they're not prepared for it.
Yeah. And it can be detrimental not only to the family of the owner, but to the employees.
Oh, yeah.
And for someone that their desire was to see not just the company be successful, but the livelihood of the employees continue to grow and prosper. You have to think about that too. It's more complex than just their own personal life.
That's right. And those are really good. Thanks for sharing that story. And thanks for the comments. It is a multiple plan process. And a lot of folks who have it's what you call a family business, they've started it, a founder generation, and they think my kids someday, they might come into this. Well, that's their plan A, but that plan A, their kids are 8 currently, right? They need to let that plan develop, and there's a lot of life between here and there. And so maybe it needs to flip to say, okay, plan A is I'm going to make good friends with my competitor. And if something happens, I need to sell, I'm going to sell to them because they know this business, they could run it. But plan B is my kids grow up and they go to college and they work in a different industry for a while. Then they realize how great dad's business is. They come back, they take over, they're mentored, and then they run a successful business going forward. But the idea just to leave it in limbo, hey, maybe this will go to my kids someday, and leave it at that. And you have a decade still before those kids are going to be of age.
It's not the best plan.
It's not a good plan.
Particularly if it's a business that requires operational management. If you're a manufacturing company or you're a service company, you have to have somebody in place to manage that. If you're buying fixed assets like real estate or something like that, it's just managing the real estate. You can hire to get that taken care of, but it's not. So the business risk is real. It's real. And think of a business today versus what it was like 20 years ago or even 30 or 40 years ago. Yeah. We have a completely different mode of businesses because of the technology changes that are going on.
Yes. So what you're talking about to me reminds me of leadership development. If you were to go onto your computer and type in succession planning, the first few searches you're going to find, or at least I did when I did this yesterday, all have to do with leadership development, how you're investing in your staff, because the topics are so related. Because you really do come to rely on the internal resources, staff, labor, skill set that is available, unless you're planning on an external hire or a sale. So anyways.
Yeah, building up that team. Because the succession is a great comment. And I think that kind of caps off that first point of building a plan, starting early. But that plan isn't just, I'm going to sell it. It's who could I sell it to, or who's going to lead this, or who's going to take over. There's a myriad of ways to structure it. From the legal perspective, there's a number of ways to structure that. But the reality is you have to have somebody who's going to step in, and you got to teach them something. You got to groom them. You got to get them prepared.
Keep up operations, to your point, the day-to-day.
So going back to your initial comment, how soon do you start thinking about it? You should always be planning with the end in mind. So when you start a business, or at least early on, you should be thinking about, okay, what's this going to look like 20 years from now or 10 years from now or whatever, Right.
And it's so applicable not just to a business owner. It's hugely applicable to a business owner, but even someone who's in a management or a leadership role. As you walk into that role, I said at the beginning, but thinking I might be walking out of this role having massive success and moving on to a larger role. But whoever's going to come behind me, I don't want this to be a gap in this, this product line or this division to falter when I leave. Like it even applies to people who are simply leaders in their organizations. So
there's an article I was reading related to public companies that the average tenure of the CEO is about 10 years. Now, I think it would be interesting.
Public companies are different
than family-owned businesses. And where we're located, Tricord Advisors in the Inland Empire, Southern California area, we have a high concentration of family-owned businesses. And so that statistic really doesn't apply because we see leadership in a family-owned business continue for much longer.
Yeah.
And but they can have similar challenges. There's changes. You might make succession plan 1, and then it might be several redrafts, depending on the twists and turns.
So the counseling is so important. So if an owner of a business is really focusing on a child to take over their business, that child doesn't have the aptitude or the desire to do that, you can imagine what the conflict is going to be in that household and the disappointment. I've made the comment to several of my clients over the years. I said, you have the passion to start the business. You're pushing that responsibility onto your child or children. And most likely what's going to happen is your grandchildren are going to reap all the profit because they're going to end up saying, I don't want to be part of this. And they'll sell it off. But what you've done is you've not given the opportunity to that child that is that next generation to really make the decision for themselves. And that's where counseling, psychological counseling that evaluates the abilities and the strengths of that second generation. They may not be suited for that, is what I'm saying. Why would you want to take their love for you and put an obligation attached to it to come into that business? And I've seen that happen. I've counseled over the years, I've counseled clients and be careful here.
Yeah.
Make sure that your child is really desiring to do this business, not just fulfilling an obligation to you.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a hard one to swallow for a lot of CEOs or owners of business.
Well, because they love their business, right?
Right.
They love it. They built it. They see the potential. Yeah.
Right.
So kind of the second step, we talked about starting early. We're going to jump to the one that for the individual who is on their way out. We talked a little bit this last week, but I think we can explore it more of it's not just an exit for a lot of people. I'm done. I'm retiring. If they're a business owner, they're an executive. High achieving people generally need to find their next thing. Not just I'm done with this, but what's my next? And sometimes they have the idea, I'm going to be the consultant for the company. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick around and just help them out. Others
just going to add salt to the mix and make it really taste
flavor.
bad.
Yeah. So I guess as part of the succession planning and the exit plan is building the person who's leaving, kind of building their next, building their retirement, because absolutely they have great knowledge and great ability. But in that moment, I think that's like you said, if it's a little bit of salt, wonderful. This is great. If it's a bucket of salt, it's going to go the other way.
Totally different flavor.
Yeah. So I mean, Randy, you've talked with a number of clients in this space. I mean, what do people want to do when they retire as business owners? Like, what are the common things that they are excited about or fearful of?
Well, again, an entrepreneur is an entrepreneur forever. And it's really hard for people who have built a company, built a business, built a practice, and then all of a sudden see themselves doing something different. And so we have a lot of conversation about transition. And candidly, I find that it's really a difficult conversation for most people. They just don't see themselves doing something different.
Yeah.
So it takes a lot of soul searching, and it takes a lot of time to be able to get to a subject matter. Unfortunately, an event typically is what drives it. So a health event or something like that, or a business downturn or something.
Kind of a forced transition.
Yeah, and that's not the you want to be able to exit, or you want to be able to transition when things are good, right?
And I mean, we're talking about the emotional process of developing a succession plan. You want to be not just purposeful, but build in the anticipation of. We talked on one of the earlier recordings about the longevity revolution, so to speak, but how the baby boomers and going forward, people are living into retirement 30 plus years. And so there's really time and space to do things that maybe they never found time for earlier. Right. So the emotional impact to be that there is, whether it's a professional endeavor to do a new skill, do something similar, complementary, et cetera, but to build anticipation. I think that helps motivate a positive succession plan for someone is that they're looking forward to what's happening next.
And I think the kind of practice, like for example, if you're a doctor, you probably are not going to see yourself continuing on in your practice beyond a certain age, depending upon what it is. And most likely you're not going to go into business to develop a medical practice. If you are a manufacturer and you've built a business, you can probably see yourself doing that forever. If your product is needed. Again, it varies from type of structure to type of structure. How you going to do that?
Yeah.
When we talk through clients that are new to us who are either business owners or even executives, we will take them through some of the visioning process. So visioning where they're headed, how they're going to get there. Let's put some details, some meat on the bone of what they're excited about, and then we'll build their financial plan. I think the same thing applies and should apply to someone who's talking about this succession planning. I built an exit plan. I know who's going to take over. I know how that's going to work. But then kind of putting a little pause and then looking at like, what's my vision now for my next 30 years? And acknowledging that I want something that gets me out of bed in the morning and excited. It used to be this business. Like that's what got me out of bed. Whereas now I need something different. And it could be related to grandkids. It could be relating to youth sports. It could be relating to things that don't just have to make you money.
Something philanthropic or something. Yeah.
But they don't have to be philanthropic. They could also still make money. I think it's important for someone as they're looking to retire. It's not just, okay, I'm out of the business, but I'm out of the business. I'm excited about what the business is doing. I'm excited about their future success. And I'm also excited about what I'm doing and my future success and defining that success and getting to define it in a different way than they did when they were 30. 30 success often meant putting food on the table.
Right.
Now
just survival.
Yeah, survival. And now at that point of exiting a business and doing it successfully, they may not. And one of the articles that we read, it made a good comment of, if you don't have to be a consultant, you don't have to be, there. When they have questions, like they know you're the great source. And if that transition works well, you are you're going to get called. You're going to get a phone call. You're going to get asked.
Because you have something to give back.
Right,
You have the experience.
Yeah. So last item we'll talk in the time we have left is who should be involved in this process. Like, we've talked about, the plan before, the plan after. Do you fly it alone? What are your thoughts? Yeah. Who's your team? Who would you want on your team if you're exiting?
Yeah. Or who sits around the table? I think when you're developing a succession plan, certainly you want someone who can advise you on the finances, especially as you're planning out your retirement. You need to see investment growth, et cetera, how much you're putting into your retirement, et cetera, what the timing of that is and what that looks like. An attorney is the next person that comes to mind.
I think the legal aspect is really critically important.
Absolutely.
The contracts and all the succession documents is really, really important. And then you've got to have a good tax person to be able to answer some really key questions, right?
Tax is a great comment because in this moment, when you're transitioning a business, the ownership of business, there will be taxes. The question is who pays them and when. And if you pay them all at once, it pushes you into the highest tax brackets. So in order to reduce that, sometimes you want to spread them out, sometimes you want to shift them. But there's very few situations where you get through this where you don't have any taxes, right? You have to be mindful of that. The other one I would add to this is someone who's a dreamer a little bit, like someone who's not just the math and technical, but like who is the friend or who's the person that has always got the fun idea and the good adventure. Like, maybe they should be a part of this as well. To speak into your life a little bit of you've always loved, I've seen you loving having dinner parties. What if every week we start running a Disney? I don't know what it would be, but that idea to have someone who will help you vision the future. Because I think you're right. You need the training and the planning of the next generation. You need the tax and the counsel for the transition moment. But I think you also need that next.
Well, again, I think it's finding those other passions. And the passion has been maybe the business for that person for decades. And all of a sudden we have to transition that passion. What is it that you're really passionate about? Yeah. It could be a spiritual passion. It could be an educational passion. It could be, SCORE. That's why a lot of people in SCORE do really well there because they act as consultants for other younger entrepreneurs and things like that. So there's a lot of those kinds of things.
And I think somebody, going back to the timeliness that we were talking about earlier, maybe a CEO that's just started and they're really trying to think about their succession plan is, I have no clue what I want to do 20 years from now. And that's okay. You can create time and space to develop that, something that you'll be excited about, because you're right. You don't know exactly what your life's going to look like in 20 years. But going back to the reason why you plan early is you obviously, tax events you want to structure ahead of time, but you want to start thinking about those things. Sometimes it takes time for them to develop. And, God forbid there would be kind of a forced exit like death. That's something legally that you also want to structure ahead of time. So you know that your family and your staff is provided for. Right. So again, I think the timeliness, even though it may not feel natural, is really critical to this whole conversation.
I agree. And I think there's some good steps. I had a client not too long ago that one of his goals down the road was to fly his own plane, from a certain area to a certain area. And he doesn't own a plane. He's not a pilot. He doesn't have any of those things. But that was his off in the future goal. But with that, to your comment, that means he's probably going to take pilot lessons, between over the next decade. And that's going to take some time and some pieces.
Right, some preparation.
And he may realize, I hate this, and change his goal, right? But really, if he waits till he's actually exiting and then says, all right, I got to buy a plane and get a license, that's going to be very stressful and not enjoyable. It's too late. And getting a pilot's license takes a long time. And
you've got age requirements, and there's a lot of requirements to fly a plane.
So that could help inform someone's journey. I think your comment, like having the end in mind, will help inform your journey to be able to say, this is how I would love to exit, if possible, plan A or plan B or plan C. And as I exit, I want to eventually be about this. And so between here and there, I'm going to start taking some, flying lessons. I'm going to start engaging with my community in a different way. I'm going to learn to cook. I'm going to, build some pieces in that you can kind of test out that future you're thinking about. And so when you actually get there, you're ready, you're excited, and it is. So
at Tricord Advisors, we are so excited about our tagline, your future's best ally, because as you develop your vision, as it changes, we're not here to be critical of it. We're here to be the ally and the supporter and help you build a plan for how to get there. And if it changes, well, then let's shift the plan. And so we're excited about the work that we get to do for our clients in that way.
Yep. And if there's any topics you'd like us to discuss in this kind of panel discussion, you can go to our website, tricorderadvisors.com. You can leave us a comment. And we would love to get to know you. We'd also love to talk through any questions that you have for us.
Until next week, folks, may you grow in wisdom and knowledge. Thank you for listening.